When you next watch a horror movie, I want you to remember something. There is but a thin screen separating you from it. It may seem like distant fiction, but many horror films were inspired by real events. The Strangers. In this movie, a young couple are staying at a summer home. During their stay, 3 masked home invaders decide to terrorize them. With an incredibly creepy atmosphere, The Strangers did well among horror fans. Although an original story, it was based on the book Helter Skelter, which details how Charles Manson got his followers to commit murder. His cult killed 9 people. They would go out on dark nights and, under the orders of Manson, break into houses and murder their inhabitants. Ravenous. A group of soldiers go on what seems like a fairly standard rescue mission, but it takes them into an area lived in by sadistic cannibals. It's set in 19th century North America, and the soldiers soon fall into a trap set by those who wish to eat them. The story was inspired by Alfred Packer. Packer was a retired soldier turned gold prospector. In 1874, he and 5 others were crossing a mountain to reach a nearby settlement. But when reaching it, he was alone. He later admitted eating his companion's flesh to survive. For that, he received a 40-year sentence. A Nightmare on Elm Street. This is a real classic. It tells the story of a serial killer who visits his victims in their dreams, and a group of teenagers who attempt to defeat him before he murders them. It first came out in 1984, and we all know the plot by now, but most don't know that the serial killer is based on a true story. There was a family who survived the Cambodian genocide. For a long time after, their youngest child was haunted by visions while he slept. He dreamt that a serial killer was chasing him and would go days without sleep. The Town That Dreaded Sundown. Set in 1946 in a small Texas town, a hooded killer is always on the hunt for new victims. He's known as the Phantom. Town locals seek the help of a Texas Ranger to stop the Phantom. The story is based on a real serial killer also known as the Phantom. The Phantom killer claimed 5 victims in early 1946. The town enforced a curfew to prevent any more murders, but it didn't work. The story is based on a real serial killer also known as the Phantom. The Phantom would target young couples at night and kill both people. The Phantom was never identified. He simply stopped killing. The Amityville Horror. A newlywed couple move into a new house which they got a good deal on. They soon experience paranormal forces which are constantly getting more deadly. Eventually, they learn why the house was so cheap. It was the scene of a mass murder just 1 year before. The story was based on a real mass murder. A man killed his own family members within their home. After 1 year, a new family moved into that house. They soon fled, claiming to have been terrorized by demonic forces. Borderland. 3 university students go on a trip to Mexico. They arrive at a border town which they soon learn is in the grip of a cult leader. Both he and his cult are obsessed with performing human sacrifice. It's based on the story of a real cult. In 1989, they kidnapped a university student and murdered him. They were known as the Narco-Satanists, led by Adolfo Constanzo. After killing at least 25 people, he signed a death pact and commits suicide. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. A group of friends go on a trip to Texas. While there, they pick up a deranged and violent hitchhiker. When their vehicle breaks down, they find themselves hunted by a family of psychotic murderers. In the run-up to its release, it was promoted as a true story. The main killer was a chainsaw-wielding maniac called Leatherface. He was based on the real-life serial killer Ed Gein. He was notorious for murdering 3 people and using their body parts to make objects and items of clothing. He was eventually declared not guilty by reason of insanity. Wolf Creek. 3 young people go backpacking through the Australian outback. They meet a man who lives alone in the wilderness. He seems nice at first, but was simply luring them into a trap. They were taken captive by him. After escaping, the man continued to hunt them until none were left alive. Like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it was promoted as a true story, based on the serial killer Ivan Milat. He killed at least 7 people in the early 1990s. 5 of his victims were tourists backpacking in Australia. The other 2 were Australian travelers. Dracula, 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 Scars of Dracula, House of Dracula. Many films have been made featuring the character Count Dracula, the archetypal vampire. First appearing in an 1897 Gothic novel, he basically was the origin of vampire fiction. He lives in a Transylvanian castle in the late 19th century and dreams of world domination. His search for power takes him all over the world, but he needs to take Transylvanian soil with him, which he requires to survive. We can't be certain, but can be pretty sure he was inspired by Vlad the Impaler, king of a small Romanian state. His real name was Vlad Dracula, and he was notorious for executing his enemies by impaling them. He was greatly feared both by his own people and foreigners. The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Half horror, half legal drama, this film depicts the trial of church officials over the death of a 19-year-old girl. She died during an exorcism performed on her, and the priest was accused of negligent homicide. It was based on the death of Annalise Michel. She was a 23-year-old sufferer of epilepsy. She reported hearing voices and spent some time in a psychiatric hospital. Her family believed a demon had possessed her and called in a local priest. He decided their only option was an exorcism. This was in 1976, a time when exorcisms were rare, partly due to the danger involved. Throughout the ritual, she was neglected and died of dehydration.